Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Right Guys podcast, where we constantly train to preserve the Republic. And now your hosts, Josh Hammerling and Max McGuire.
Welcome back. Happy Monday, Right Guys podcast. My name is Max, here with Mr. Producer Josh. You're okay with me calling you Mr. Producer Josh, right?
It's my handle, dude. It's been my handle.
Last week when we had Madison on, you gave a little bit of a facial expression. Just wanted to check.
With Producer Josh. I thought it was funny. Like, I was just thinking about how after we've done all this stuff, people know me as Producer Josh, right? That has just become a moniker. Yeah. And as she said it, I was like, well, that's going to be with me forever.
I just wanted to double check, right?
Oh, yeah. I love it.
Was it that the left says you need to get continuous consent? So I just want to make sure you're still okay with it.
It was good. Madison was a heck of a man. She's a spitfire. I want to get her back and start the, because you can't get into the whole meat and potatoes of that.
I think that was on you. I was giving you any final questions, Josh, as we're wrapping up, and you're giving her like a DBQ from high school. Like,
yeah. Oh yeah, man.
Like, show your work. Write a long form essay.
But she had all the right answers. I mean, there's so much in there I was trying to get out. It's easy to sit there and ask 10, 20 questions of a person like that and get 10 or 20 answers, right? Maybe get 30 answers sometimes. So I regret nothing.
I'll shoot her some messages and see if we can have her back on. It's hard to get in touch with her sometimes when she's on different recovery operations with her task force and things like that. Right. So we'll definitely get her on for another episode to kind of flesh out some of the stuff we didn't have time for. Lots happened since last week. It just keeps getting worse.
I mean,
I still think Trump is going to win out in the end, but the state of New York is preparing to take his guns.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me because he lives in Florida, right? So if you are convicted of a felony, under state law, you lose your right to keep and bear arms. There are some cases working their way through the court system now, especially in the Fifth Circuit, challenging that idea for non-violent offenders. The idea that, in the case of Trump, you forged business documents, right? Do you belong in the same category of criminal as someone who murdered his whole family? Logically, no, right? But the way the law treats it is the minute you have been convicted of a crime for more than 1 year or certain violent misdemeanors, you lose your right to keep and bear arms. So the state of New York is taking away his guns. But interestingly enough, that shouldn't have to happen, right? He can give them to Melania. He can give them to Barron. In the state of Florida, he might not be able to buy a gun under the age of 21, but he is 18. And technically, he can be gifted handguns. So there's no reason to turn them over to the state when he can easily gift them to his son.
It'll probably be, it's somewhat symbolic, I'm sure. Just give up the guns. Fine. If the state wants to stick it to me, here you go. And watch Trump hand over like a Glock and like a simple utilitarian weapons, right? Nothing.
Or it's going to be like, or it's going to be something crazy. It's going to be like, oh yes, this is Alexander Hamilton's dueling pistols. It's going to be something crazy like that.
Sure. And it's got deep historic precedence in it, but they can't wait to show that. And is it going to happen on the cameras? Right? Is CNN going to be on scene when Trump has to give his guns over? Right? I mean, is there already going to be a camera person there waiting for this stuff to happen? And it's only going to make him stronger. But having to give up those guns, just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, why do we call him a felon?
Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I was reading a lot into it. Technically, if I was in this situation, which I hope I never find myself in, but the way this is going, especially some of the cases we're going to talk about that are even in our orbit, we might find ourselves. Who knows? All my guns are in a trust. So what I would probably do is I would amend the trust to say that I'm not like a trustee or have conditional trustee status, right? Conditional on me not having a felony record or winning on appeal or being granted clemency, right? You could do that. You could make it in a trust, have all the guns in the trust, list everyone who could be part of the trust, and then have all the membership be conditional. But that's probably more complicated, especially if he just has a Glock, right?
Yeah, I mean, the man loves ketchup on stuff. I got to imagine that he might have one of those Trump guns, right? It might just he
Yeah,
might have some of those 45s where everybody made him something cool. He's probably been gifted a few things too that are really really groovy. But
yeah,
we've talked on this show before about what the felony means, right? It nowhere in the Constitution does it say when you get charged with this kind of crime, suddenly you lose all, or at least convicted of crime, you lose all of your rights, right? It was never in there, and it became a useful tool
yeah,
to go after groups that you wanted to disarm and all that. But as anybody starts to become a felony, right, we start seeing how perverse the felony charge really is, because now you can leverage that against your political enemies.
yeah,
Now, imagine Trump not being able to vote for himself if he was in the state of New York as his residence,
yeah.
right? He's in Florida, it's a little different. But now you can't vote for yourself. You can't vote
Well,
for
that's the other thing.
being alive.
Because he lives in Florida, this is something that DeSantis' office came out with. Because he's in Florida, Florida defers to um the state where he was convicted, right?
Yeah.
So New York has different rules around it, but technically, because DeSantis is on the committee to the clemency committee,
Mhm.
DeSantis has said if it comes down to it, he'll just grant him clemency and Trump will be able to vote again, right?
Wow.
And that's where you could see a world where Florida could pass a law that says anyone under Secret Service protection, like the disarmament provision in Florida law, doesn't apply to anyone under Secret Service protection, right? And that's where
Mm,
the logic completely falls apart.
mhm.
Donald Trump has legitimate threats to his life. Like not some people make them up, some people exaggerate them.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is probably more threatened than Joe Biden.
Any
They're,
world
def-
figure.
they're,
Yeah.
they're definitely up there. The idea that he can't defend himself, but an entire army of Secret Service agents can with fully automatic weapons doesn't make sense. And if he goes into court and says, Your Honor, I have threats against my life. And in addition to bringing these lawfare cases against me, Democrats are also advancing bills to strip me of my Secret Service protection. Your Honor, I must have the right to defend myself. This is a This is a death warrant.
Mhm.
If you don't give it to me, that's a pretty compelling argument, especially if you then cite the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals cases dealing with nonviolent felons.
Yeah. Yeah. And if a bunch of illegal aliens can come in and they can arm themselves without ever having to pass background check or anything like that, why can't the former
Yeah.
president of the United States keep a gun to protect himself? So
Yeah.
it's starting to ring not just hollow on the other side, but we get to see that it's obviously just directed warfare.
You know, it would be really
Lawfare.
fun. It would
Mm.
be really fun. I don't know if you've ever looked into the loopholes and the technicalities, but technically, muzzle loaded antique pistols do not qualify as firearms under the law dealing with firearm prohibitions for felons. So there are a
Like,
lot of people who have felonies who aren't allowed to own firearms. But any firearm, technically, I believe it's 1899, 1898, right around there. Any gun made before that, you can own without running afoul of the prohibition. Now it gets really interesting because there are Mosin Nagants that are made before the cutoff date,
I know, and they're a
right?
cartridge rifle, right?
Yeah. Then you get into trouble of, okay, you have a cartridge, felon in possession of ammunition, but there are muzzle loading designs from before 1898, 1899, whatever the cutoff date is. And they're not cool by modern standards, but I mean, they put a 50 caliber hole in people.
Right, like a blunderbuss still
Yeah,
shoots a lot of shot,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Boom. And you just have one or two, one in each hand. I
I
mean, you
think
could
it'd
do
be really
something.
cool. I think it'd be really cool. He comes up to a stage at one of his rallies. Says, hold on, just got take it out of my holster." Just plops down right on a
Right,
muzzle loading like
right,
antique. He's like, "This is all they're letting me defend
right.
myself with."
They're just making them heavier and heavier these days, right? Boom. Takes off the extra mag, and it's one of those powder horns. I mean, there's stuff he could do with it that would certainly show it, but uh, it's been nothing but attack, attack, attack. It's been nothing trying to strip him of everything. I mean, is there anything they're not trying to go after Donald Trump for right now? I mean, that you can think of. The only
No,
one who's in real jeopardy right now of going to jail is Hunter Biden, right? We're still waiting for deliberations on that federal gun charge.
here's from the ATF
Ooh,
itself. Can a person prohibited by law from possessing a firearm own a black powder firearm? Because black powder firearms are considered antique firearms, the possession of a black powder firearm by a person subject to federal firearms disabilities is not prohibited by the Gun Control Act. However, a person subject to federal firearms disabilities may not receive and or possess black powder firearms that can be readily converted to fire fixed ammunition by replacing the barrel, bolt, breech lock, yada, yada, yada.
yeah.
Additionally, state law may prohibit the possession of a black powder firearm by persons who are not federally prohibited.
So
So
it
this is,
prevents you from getting a black powder pistol that you can convert with cartridges,
yeah.
right?
So you just literally just got to go old school. You got to
Yeah.
go to
Oh,
Sotheby's, or you got to go to Rock Island auctions. Can you imagine Trump at Rock Island auctions where they every quarter they had these massive gun auctions? Can you
yeah.
imagine him just bidding on everything older than 1899?
Yeah. I'm going to use that flintlock for self-defense. And then when I'm done, it turns into a club, right? Boom, you turn it around, and it's
When's the
he could
next?
probably buy something nice, but it doesn't surprise.
Next one's
It
in
just shows you
Texas.
what would he buy there? Sporting and
Let's
collectors.
go to antique firearms.
I mean, you could go to American Gun Crafts right now
All
and
right,
buy
so
yourself a black powder shotgun.
he could go lever actions.
Ooh,
Here we go. Lever
not one
action
of,
pistols. That's hot.
oh, that would be actually. I'd love one of those.
The
But this
cool
is what
thing
he's
about
relegated to.
this is like a Marlin 1881 in 4570. People are buying 4570 lever actions today. Like
Yeah,
that's not, now you might not be able to withstand some of the modern powder loads in this,
sure.
but technically Donald Trump could own this.
Mhm.
A little Colt single action army. Can you imagine? He just becomes a cowboy action shooter.
Right? Dual holster, one on each side. Maybe one
No
on the front
holsters.
carries three in
One in the
case he's
front,
sitting,
one in
right?
the front, one on each side.
Yeah, yeah. And then I hope he wear the leather and the hat to go with it, like big old Trump 45 on the hat,
Yeah.
or 47 now, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, a 45 Colt.
A lot of people were
Yeah.
lot of bad guys taken with black powder rifles, probably more than
They'd probably say though that it could fire modern. So I think we gotta go to muzzle
something that's
loader.
probably got a it's got an igniter powder, right? Everything has to be caseless. I'm guessing that a lot of this has to do with it being caseless. But is he? We have to review what felony
Here we go.
means.
Here we go. This is where we're getting into the good stuff.
The ladies' prize,
It's
1862.
only one. There's only one rifle up for auction. One musket up for auction. I don't know. He has the ability to do something really cool,
Yeah.
and I'd be recommending that you do it.
But now he's got to surrender those firearms. I got a feeling it's going to be very public once it happens. They might even take the picture of the selected firearms. Once he surrenders them, do they have a database that they're going to match that to? See if he's actually given up all of his guns? If that's the case, where's that database coming up from?
That's the thing that we've always worried, that if they have a
Yeah.
database, it could be used against you.
Sure.
Maybe he used to have a gun and he sold it, but that sale isn't in the registry. So
Sure.
they're convinced that he still has a gun. They raid his house again. You know what I mean? That's the kind of stuff.
Right.
The government has no business, knowing this information at all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting kind of weirded out. I'm trying new technology on my end.
Yeah.
NVIDIA broadcast. They have AI assisted looking in the camera.
I was wondering why you were staring so hard at the camera at one point, and it was
So
almost
really
creepy.
I know. Right now, I'm actually looking there. Isn't that kind of cool?
I don't know. It looks really unnatural. Kind of.
Oh no, we lost Josh. He was so skeeved by the eye contact. Look unnatural. Yeah, I was trying that, see if it worked. Oh, you're back.
Power's going crazy over here.
Oh yeah.
I've got no excuses here. So, but
Yes, that's what I was doing with the eye contact. I'll turn that off, but maybe I'll turn it back on later. Who knows?
freak me out. Freak me out.
So
What's
yeah,
it doing?
that's going on with Trump, where he's meeting today. He has his apparently today he has his pre-sentencing interview, which is where he'll meet with the parole office, and he'll tell his side of the story, and then they'll present a report to the judge. The judge can use at sentencing. So, like, if he goes in and he's not going to get on his knees and beg for mercy, he says he's not going to do that. What the report's probably going to say is Donald Trump shows no remorse for what he did, right?
Sure.
And that's going to go to the judge, and the judge is going to say, "Oh, the probation office says you show no remorse for what you did. Is that true?"
And he'll say yes.
And then it's saying, "Your Honor, I have already told you. I've already filed the paperwork. I am appealing this. I believe this ruling is wrong. I am not going to confess guilt for something I am actively appealing." Right? That's an easy way to walk around it, but generally, you don't have a lawyer there with you for this kind of interview.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, if having him, he's probably got to have counsel everywhere where he goes.
Yeah, especially because anything he says can and will be used against him. Certainly, they will use anything they can against him.
Yeah.
They took a check he wrote to his lawyer, and on the check for the subject, he wrote legal expense, and that became a felony. So yeah, anything he says will be used against him.
Yeah, everything's a felony that comes out of his mouth. They'll find a way to turn it into a felony. Obviously, we've seen
Chandy
that.
says 5149, more likely than not, Mershon sends him to jail 4 to 6 months. For a first-time offender, that's actually a lot. In most cases, this wouldn't have been brought as 34 counts. They would have just combined it into one count, right? They stacked the charges because they wanted to go for the headline of 34 counts. No one would ever be forced to serve them all back to back to back to back. Yeah, it's possible. It's possible that he sentences him to prison. Certainly, it's possible. Anyone not named Trump probably doesn't get prison. Probably gets probation. There are people who are committing violent crimes, and they're avoiding prison.
Wait,
people being caught with illegal guns, and they're avoiding prison.
Wasn't there a whole bunch of push in New York to help people who were affected with gun crime and all that stuff?
Yep.
And I'm only remembering a little bit, but they called them something kind of funny, like they're not felons anymore. We call them something else. They're trying to lighten it, and then they were cutting back on the time, like the felony. I don't remember.
So this is interesting with Democrats overall. Generally, they are trying to move away from the term felon offender, because they're saying that calling someone that is discriminatory, it's cruel, which is it's a little humorous, because literally right before this conviction came down against Trump, there was breaking news out of Illinois, of all places, that they were no longer going to, under state law, refer to any convict as an offender. And instead, they were going to start referring to them as, quote, justice impacted individuals, end quote. Right? So the left, for everyone except Trump, the left's position is that it's not right to everywhere they go for the rest of their life be referred to as a felon. Right?
Interesting.
That they deserve better than that. That even if someone commits a felony, it's wrong for that felony or that criminal conviction to follow them around forever. So we're not going to call them that. They're a justice impacted individual. It's so funny how quickly it turns.
Yeah.
Because this is literally a week away from Donald Trump, that conviction. All of a sudden, everyone now, even on CNN, they're not referring to him as former president. They're not referring to him as Mr. Trump. These leftists are referring to him as felon Trump.
Convicted felon.
Felon Trump.
I was in Minnesota over the weekend, and I had local news on. Every time they reported on Trump, it was convicted felon Donald Trump. not presidential
Yeah.
candidate, not former president, not just Mr. former or convicted felon Donald Trump.
But and that's so atypical, right? And this is where you run into the AP style guide. The AP style guide does not tell you to do this. There is no style guide that says if someone is convicted of a crime, you go back and look at other politicians who have been convicted. You look at Bob McDonnell in Virginia, which we talked about on podcast last week. When the media reported about him, it did not say convicted felon Bob McDonnell. It didn't, right?
No.
This is not trying to make sure that there's accurate reporting. These are people who are convinced that saying this over and over and over again will help Joe Biden. And the polling, interestingly enough, doesn't pan out. There is a small minority of voters who are influenced by hearing that Donald Trump is a convicted felon.
Yeah.
The vast majority of the American people don't care. I believe it was a CBS or an ABC poll that just came out showing Donald Trump is gaining well after the conviction.
Yeah. Yeah. And then right after the conviction, how many of those polls came out from CNN and all those other outlets that Republicans are leaving Donald Trump because of the felony conviction? And the title's on the front page of everything that's going on. So they get their headline for a day and then it goes away because they realize that people are they're starting to donate more money. They're starting to identify with Donald Trump. Heck, he's the only guy in politics that's ever really been a felon now that sees what the government does when they put you on paper. You know what I mean?
Here's the Real Clear Politics average of polls. These all include Americans learning that he had been convicted. So with the exception of the Rasmussen +5, everything else on the board has Donald Trump. The people knew about it. People knew about the conviction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And with the exception of the Reuters Ipsos poll right here, everything else, either I guess the Yahoo News, Trump's still winning, right? The average of polls, even in the wake of this, Trump's still winning. There's these accounts on Twitter though, these Biden wins accounts, where every day they're like breaking news.
Yeah,
Joe Biden is climbing in the polls.
Yeah.
Look at Arizona. Do you think Arizona cares? The latest one after the conviction, Fox News, Trump up +5.
Wasn't that
Arizona
up like
doesn't
a point or two?
What?
That's up a point or two.
Yeah.
Some of these.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Nevada. Fox News again, +5 for Trump in Nevada. Do you see over the weekend, Trump came out with a policy proposal to make waitress and waiter tips untaxed?
Yeah.
Did you see that?
I did.
Did you see the culinary union's response in Nevada?
No, I did not, as I was out of touch. I saw it and I was like, oh my, like that might be a good move for anybody that might have tips, but what did they respond with? I mean, were they on board? Were they off board? I mean, did they show their blue colors?
Off board as you can get.
Really?
Now, the culinary union has been fighting for decades to try and make tips not taxed. Right?
Really?
Yes. And so that tips aren't overtaxed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the statement from the culinary union. For decades, the culinary union has fought for tipped workers' rights and against unfair taxation. Relief is definitely needed for tip earners, but Nevada workers are smart enough to know the difference between real solutions and wild campaign promises from a convicted felon. This is the leading presidential candidate who we just showed in the polls in Nevada, leading by 5. And before the conviction, he was leading by as many as 13 in the early May New York Times poll. So this isn't an outlier. He's leading everywhere except for the Bloomberg poll in early May. The culinary union has been fighting to try and make tips not taxed. And even they can't get out from in front of themselves and refrain from using the convicted felon. That's how you know this is just politics.
Yeah.
This is just politics.
Yeah. I mean, that's wild, man. Something that they've always wanted to happen. And I don't think every person who might be part of the culinary union feels this way, but certainly the secretary treasurer does, right?
Oh
And you
yeah,
can feel the bias sitting there. But do you really
yeah.
think people part of the culinary union are sitting at home thinking,
Well, this is the whole thing, right?
yeah,
As the economy goes, Nevada goes. So Joe Biden can gaslight the entire country that things are getting better. You
mhm,
can't gaslight Las Vegas because
yeah,
Las Vegas won't shut down. It's not like they're going to close, though there are some casinos that they're closing. They're going to just closed, what was it, Tropicana,
yeah,
um, for the new baseball stadium. There are some businesses closing in Nevada, but what will happen is you'll go from, oh wow, this week we're going to have 5 conventions, to
mhm,
suddenly, okay, maybe there's 2 conventions. That
yeah.
might not seem like a lot, but it is,
It's
right?
huge.
It's huge. And the culinary union, other than the ones who are doing, like, I mean, even the ones who are doing banquets and stuff, right? The work that they get is dependent on the people who want food prepared,
Service.
right?
Yeah,
So
total
if you
service.
lose a convention, the culinary workers lose a job. Not They don't lose their job, but they lose a gig.
A job. They lose revenue.
Yes, they lose
One
income.
event can be the difference between making or breaking an events company for the year,
Yes,
right? Just one. Just one.
yes,
Just one event can make or break you. And then if they lose one or two, you're looking for a new job to supplement your income in a tough Biden economy. So it just blows my mind that the culinary union would make a statement saying that we don't believe or know the difference between solutions and wild campaign promises from a victim felon. Did
yeah,
Trump actually do most of the things he said he was going to do
yeah.
when he was in office?
The
So
things
can
that
one
the
not
things
think that
that
he might
he
do
promised
this?
to do, the things that he promised to do, he either did or he ran into conflict from Republicans or Democrats and they blocked him
Yeah,
from doing it. There wasn't a single promise he made that he didn't do because he didn't want to do it.
yeah,
It was either he couldn't do it and he got blocked, or they cut his funding, right?
yeah,
And you look at waitresses, waiters. It's not just the banquet servers and things like that. Look at all the restaurants on the strip, right?
yeah. Oh yeah. I
The
mean,
big holidays, New Vegas is going to be busy regardless. But the weeks in between those big events, the weeks in between, some of those restaurants, I don't know if you've ever walked past them, they're empty.
yeah,
If you're in Vegas in a not particularly busy weekend or busy week, a lot of times you'll walk the strip and there might be some tables full, but the restaurant isn't full. Those are
no,
the kind of things that you can't gaslight away. You can't trick a waiter or waitress into thinking that they actually had a full schedule the week before. You can't trick them into thinking that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. Max, did this also does this just go beyond culinary workers? Anybody that might be tipped? So let's say the Uber driver. Let's say the guy at the airport driving the airport van, right? What about the guy that's bringing up your luggage to your room, right? The bellhops and they get tipped. The car guys, anybody that gets a tip. And
Yeah,
if you've ever lived with tipping culture, most of those folks are barely scraping by a living as it is. I
yeah.
mean, nobody's going to disagree with me with that, especially tip workers. So
Oh, for
imagine a
sure.
world where your tip is now non-taxable. And it's great because taxes are evil. And if the government doesn't get a cut of something, it's great. Right? Why does the government think it has to get a piece of everything we do? I hate that. That's like the supposition they start with. Oh, you got to give us a piece of everything. No, we don't. And then Trump comes up with a solution for people who need it most, especially in a tight economy. And a bunch of union people don't like it
Yeah.
because of what reasoning? Right? Just it's totally asinine. It's beyond dumb. It's politically
The way
motivated.
he said it, it wasn't just restaurant tips, it's every tip. And
That's huge
I think that probably would lead to an increase in customer service. You're
by
telling
far.
people every dollar you collect in tips is automatically worth 30%, 40% more.
Mhm.
Well, then you start really working for those tips. And in a world where it seems like everyone's asking for a tip, right?
Mhm,
I went the other day. I went to a place that does like ice cream, and it was like a make your own ice cream.
mhm.
No, it was like a make your own soda and stuff. So you go up,
Sounds
you make
great.
the soda, and then you go up and you pay at the kiosk. And it was asking for a tip. Like, who are we tipping? Who are we
I've
tipping over
noticed
here?
that for coffees, they want me to tip. Like, there's a difference between industries that
Yeah,
have actual tips and the ones that I think companies just try to collect the extra tip for the extra money and keep a little bit and give the
I don't
rest to the.
know.
I don't
I
know how
don't
that works.
know.
Do you?
Yeah. So I was doing that I got confused for a second because I just read an article. It was on Barstool. It was about this, and they were talking about the ice cream thing, and what their idea was that if you order standing up, you don't have to tip. I think that's interesting. Now, the exception, and I agree with
Mhm,
Barstool,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
The exception should be bars for sure, right? If you're
Yeah.
obviously if you stand
Yeah.
up a bar, you still tip. And I
Yeah.
could imagine where you put an order in at a counter, but then you have table service. Generally, though, if you order standing up, I can understand. I
Yeah.
can understand the not tipping because everyone's asking for a tip. Everyone's asking for a tip. And
Everywhere.
it doesn't feel like anyone is, when you give these tips, it doesn't feel like they're particularly happy to get it. Um,
Yeah.
I
'Cause
would,
I don't even know if they're
yeah,
getting the tip, right? Like, I'm
yeah,
trying to tip a particular person, and then if I tip with the card, it goes to all the people, even the jackass in the back that's not doing anything, right? I like having cash on hand. Like, when the airport I was at the airport, someone grabbed my bag before me before I even asked. I'm like, "That earns a tip, right? Here's
mhm,
your buck, here's your 2." So, I don't know. I just don't want people to have to pay more taxes than they have to. We've got a golden opportunity to help
yeah,
save Americans money, right? To keep more
yeah,
money in their pockets, and nobody wants it all of a sudden?
yeah. No, I was just in Florida, and we had all these bags, and the bellhop. They insisted on us using the bellhop service. Okay, fine. It was a cashless resort, so the resort says don't bring cash, and it
Mhm.
makes it a little hard to tip the bellhops when they
They
say
don't have
don't bother with cash. So I think we gave the bellhop $7, right? We had more bags. We had more than 7 bags, so it came out to less than $1 a bag. But it's
yeah,
a cashless resort. What are you going to do? There's all the
right.
cash we had on us. So he brings it out to our car and just drops it and walks away. Well, I just sat there and I watched him load the bags into other people's cars. They paid him after the fact, right? So that made me think that the reason he didn't load our bags into the car is because we tipped less than $1 a bag.
Maybe. Yeah,
I bet you if we hadn't tipped him before he brought the bags over, I think he would have loaded them into the car, hoping that we tip him more.
sure. But that's what tips do. It ensures proper service, right?
Yeah.
That's the point of it, to ensure proper service. It
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Oh, I was with
you
my
grease
grandma.
wheels with money. You grease
I
wheels
was
with money.
I was with my grandma, and I see this with people who are older. They come from a different age where the amount you tip, like if you're one of the older generations, you're more likely to tip 15% than someone in our generation, maybe 18-20%. Like you look
Yeah.
on receipts, when the receipts give you the suggested tips, 15% isn't even an option anymore on many of these
Yeah.
receipts. Um, and you feel bad, but it's just it's just how they've grown up with tipping. Tipping has changed. People have become a lot more reliant on tips. I
Yeah.
look at the Trump promise and I'm shocked the culinary union gave him
Would
that
take that.
slap in the face.
Yeah. Then, they're probably going to experience kind of a renaissance in their industry if this passes, right? How many people would start moving towards service industry where they knew they could get tax-free tips? Like, who wouldn't move that way? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Government doesn't have their fingers in it. You get to walk away with more, and then they thumb their nose. They're like, I don't, nah, I don't. We don't need it. We don't
Yeah.
need it.
This culinary union is, by the way, the same culinary union that just unendorsed state Democrats in Nevada because they passed a bill lessening the requirements for hotels to clean rooms up to COVID standards.
Whoa.
So the law said we're in the middle of a COVID pandemic. You have to sanitize everything in the room. Now you're no longer required to, because we're not in the middle of a COVID pandemic, whatever you want to call it, right? So the culinary union is mad. Now, if I was an employee, I'd be happy about that. Oh, you're telling me I don't have to disinfect every single surface, every single room. I can get more rooms done. More likely to keep my job. That's great.
Yeah.
Culinary union doesn't think that.
Wow. I mean, it's hilarity, but it's par for the course, because if Joe Biden was to put this out and say, I want to get rid of tips, everybody, it would be on the news as the greatest thing that could be happening for our economy right now. Right. This is part of the soft landing. Bidenomics at work, right? If he was to come out and say, tips are eliminated, it's Bidenomics at work, everybody wants it.
Yeah.
The culinaries would come out and love it, right? The unions be like, this is an amazing move. We've been waiting for this for years. Thank you, Joe Biden, right? But we're not getting that.
Instead,
we're not getting that.
They put out a press release saying he's a convicted felon and we don't trust anything he says. I think that you're going to see that this convicted felon line doesn't have nearly the play that Democrats think it's going to have.
I'd argue
especially not considering that the Democrat Party platform has for years literally had a plank in it saying felons shouldn't be treated differently because they have a conviction.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like, here it is. The Democrat Party. Let's go through it. Let's go through it, right? Protecting communities and building trust by reforming our criminal justice system.
Fantastic.
This too. Here we go. Democrats support federal and state efforts to, quote, ban the box, end quote, to make it easier for returning citizens to access work opportunities through the Jobs Corps. What does ban the box mean? Ban the box means when you go to a job interview and they give you a paper, if you ban the box, that means the company isn't allowed to ask you, do you have a previous conviction? Check the box, yes, if you do, and explain what it is. The Democrat Party platform has in it a policy proposal to make it a crime for, for an employer to even ask if you have a felony conviction. And yet their entire campaign now to put Biden back in the White House is to say you shouldn't give Donald Trump the job because he has a previous conviction.
But we need to make sure that convicted felons make their way back into society, Max, so that they can integrate in to the citizenry again. So why does everybody else on the planet, or everybody else in the US, get a pass, and then suddenly Donald Trump is the one where we got to make sure that the box stays, right? Does he have to check the box when he takes the oath of office? I mean, are they going to present that to him? I solemnly swear to uphold the Constitution. Oh, please fill this checkbox for being a felony. Is that what's going to happen with it?
Here's the other line. The formerly incarcerated should not be blocked from exercising their voting rights or accessing public services, including Pell Grants and nutrition assistance available to other free citizens of the United States. Continuing to punish a person after they've rejoined the community is both cruel and counterproductive. So if Donald Trump gets sentenced to probation, let's say he's sentenced to probation, right? And then the clemency committee in Florida restores all of his voting rights. Under the Democrat Party platform, they should be happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
On the Democrat Party platform, they should not refer to him as a felon. As under the Democrat Party platform, they should not make a previous conviction any part of the campaign for the highest office, the biggest job interview in the world. And this is why I think when you look at the African American community growing for Trump, going from 8% of the vote in 2020, now the latest poll I saw showed 23% of the vote. That's a huge jump.
It's massive.
Huge jump.
But it's because they know they have unfairly been put in these positions with family and friends, right? Even their own lives. They see how much this has ruined their lives. They make a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes, right? It just happens to carry that felony tag, and they see it, right? They live it every day. And now the one person who actually can do the things that he says to help him is being just completely attacked by the left, right? I mean, how could you not see it? How could you not identify with it?
When they say don't vote for Trump, he's got a felony conviction. And someone says, well, I know people with felony convictions. They got a raw end of the deal. They got screwed. They probably didn't deserve it. The cop lied on the stand, right? Everyone knows. Everyone has you don't have to be. It's not a black or white thing. Everyone knows someone who's been shafted by the criminal justice system.
Right.
Right. It's not a white, black, rich, poor thing. Everyone knows someone who got a raw end of the deal. And to make it the whole campaign that, oh no, don't vote for this guy. He's just like you and the people you know.
Right. Yeah.
Don't you dare question a judge or a jury. When all of us know someone whose case is so ridiculous, we have a lot of questions about the judge and the jury.
Absolutely.
Right? Have you ever served on jury duty, Josh?
I've never even gotten to the part where they keep me and select me.
Really?
I dodged every single one. Every single time. I haven't even gotten to the part where they ask questions. They're just like, all right, see you. You're on the go home list.
Have you ever had to go in person? Really?
The one day I did actually have to show up. I walked into the building and they said, this number group, stay. The rest of you are dismissed. I was always in the dismissed group.
So last time I went was last year, and I almost got put on a case.
Wow.
I was this close to making it to voir dire, where they questioned the jurors. And right before they were walking us in, literally minutes before they walked us in, there was a plea deal.
Wow.
Because once they walk us in and we start that process, there's no pleading out, right? Or it's a lot harder to plead out. You have to get the judge in on it. So yeah, I was this close. And Josh, the people I was standing in that hallway with were dumb as rocks. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying that probably if you go anywhere in the country and you collect just a room full of the average people that live in that area, you're going to find some people who are dumb as rocks.
Yeah.
Now, there were a couple of smart people in there. For sure, I was talking to them. Talked to a few people I'd probably label dumb as rocks, but they seem nice, so it doesn't really matter. But in terms of this idea that you have to respect the jury opinion no matter what, have these people ever gone through the jury process? There are some very unintelligent people who weasel their way out of these juries.
And on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they've got axes to grind. They're just normal people like you and me. But somehow, they're treated with, obviously this is the smartest person we could pick.
I'd venture to say, and I've talked to family members who get jury summonses, and I'm going to skip. I'm going to try and get an excuse. I tell them, no, go. We've seen what they're doing with the lawfare. The smart people are the ones who get the excuses and get excused, right? Like, I can't go, I have work, right? Well, I can't go, I have these commitments. You got to go because you've seen what they've done with the lawfare. You've seen what they've done in all these cases. You see what's going on with these pride murals drawn onto streets? Have you seen that?
I've seen people putting them up. There's been some folks who have been walking around defacing things. Like some of the ones on the street. Was there something new that hit?
There's the one in Washington. There's the one in Washington where there are 3 teenagers who are now facing 10 years in prison for a skid mark that they made on the Rainbow Road mural using an e-scooter.
Oh,
felony. They're saying it costs more than $1,000 to repaint it.
It's a road mural. Felony.
They're tacking on. It looks like they're tacking on hate crimes, 1st-degree malicious mischief. They want hate crime charges.
I mean, it sounds standard left approach.
Yeah, it's happening, but it's happening in Florida too.
You can't protest it, and it's a hate crime just because you don't believe with it. And now you get to go to jail longer.
Yeah.
I knew there was people that were using their trucks going over, but an e-scooter going over, like, who cares? What happens if you stop too fast and you leave a skid mark?
This guy didn't stop too fast. This guy did a donut right in the middle of it. But here in Florida, they're saying it caused more than $1,000 in damage. And therefore, it's a felony. But here's the thing, right? It'd be one thing if they did this mural on a wall and someone came up and defaced the wall. That's fine. Roads are going to get marks on them. People are going to break in intersections. Now, you don't do a donut. That's excessive. Last year or the year before, there was a guy who went through one, literally just skidding through it. He had his foot on the gas and the brake at the same time, skidding through it. That's wrong. But kids riding e-scooters and braking on them, if there wasn't the mural, they wouldn't face charges for braking, just hitting the brakes on a road. But now it's a felony. I mean, this is lawfare. This is lawfare. This is another type of lawfare. And Josh, I thought it was illegal to paint these colors on roads. It's been a while since I've ever been through driver's ed, but I seem to remember that there are heavy restrictions on what you're allowed to do when there's a yellow line painted on a road. But and that you can't just paint yellow lines.
Yeah, because there's laws that determine this stuff. My next question is did the city paint this mural, or was this a mural painted by volunteers?
Private volunteers with city permission tends to be what happens. My understanding is that anytime there's something red painted on a road, that makes it a fire lane.
Yeah.
If the road is red, it's a fire lane. So are we supposed to believe that right down the middle of this road is a fire lane? And you actually lose an entire lane of traffic because that lane is actually painted all yellow. You're not allowed to cross over a solid yellow line.
So what does the orange line mean? Is it what's going on here? What am I supposed to believe?
I don't know what orange means. Let's see.
I don't think there is, but now you got to determine. You got to deal with it. But so this isn't a city funded project. Volunteers put it on with their own money, and they're going to charge people with a hate crime on something the city isn't required to maintain. That's the other piece, is if the city maintains it.
Solid yellow and solid orange mean you cannot cross.
Okay.
A solid white line can sometimes mean you cannot cross. Solid white line can also mean that there is construction ahead.
Okay.
See, we're all expected to learn these things.
And
but then they're just allowed to go out on the road and just paint these colors on the road.
I mean, on its face, this thing should be thrown out.
If it didn't have to do with pride, this would be illegal. They'd say, no, you cannot arbitrarily draw red, orange, yellow lines on the road. Those colors mean something, and that'll be confusing to drivers. Right? That would be the problem if it wasn't about pride. But because it's about pride, everyone, let's just put safety to the wind. Let's just paint all the colors. Come on.
Well, Max, okay, let's say the city paints a line, and they have to maintain it, and you destroy it. That makes a lot of sense. It does, right? If you were to purposely deface street markers or signs, that would be a real problem. But if I was to go and just say anything on the ground, it's defacing. So why aren't the people that deface the road in the first place facing charges? And how can you deface a defacement? Meaning this thing is already technically not supposed to be there. So how can you ruin such a thing that's not supposed to be there in the first place, that the city doesn't fund, that the city can't maintain and wouldn't maintain? And the rainbow is also a deeply Christian symbol.
Yeah. God will never flood the earth again.
Yeah. So are you sure he was going after LGBT people and not Christians? Like, how do you determine who the hate goes to?
Yeah, we don't know. Skid marks don't stay on the road forever. You get a few days of heavy rain. Skid marks can get washed away. More people driving over them can get rid of the skid marks. Hell, just wait for the end of the month when the street sweeper comes, and that'll probably get rid of most of the skid marks.
Yeah.
The problem is this paint on the road isn't designed to survive a street sweeper. They didn't
No.
use street paint. They didn't put the coats over it to make sure it wouldn't get faded by the sun. It wouldn't get washed away. They just went out and got just hardware store paint. So if they put a street sweeper, if they sprayed it down with a hose and brought a street sweeper out, it would look like a finger painting.
And those paints aren't even designed to last that long, even on your house.
No.
Like a latex paint will not stay on the road, gang.
No.
As soon as a big heavy storm comes through, it'll wash away. If it gets too hot, it'll peel.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand what this defacement means. I mean, what's the act of hate in this situation?
One of these news reports, they went out the next day to look for the skid marks. They weren't there anymore, but they're still hunting the guy for a temporary damage. It's insane. All this is insane. None of it makes any sense.
Yeah.
And if it didn't have to do with pride, the people who painted the road would be arrested, right? You can't just go out on the road and paint designs on the road. Well, actually, you can if it's Black Lives Matter. You can if it's pride.
Got it.
But nothing else. Well, we're almost done. I want to talk about one more bit of lawfare because it involves some news out of Colorado, your hometown.
Oh,
our former boss, Joe Altman. He's facing a little bit of it himself. There was a story that broke over the weekend. Last week, he had a deposition where he was called to testify or answer questions for Eric Coomer's other lawsuit, which was this against Clay Clark. I think this was the one against Clay Clark. Now, this is something that Coomer's legal team is doing. They are facing pushback in the main lawsuit against Joe, our old company, Donald Trump, all the people. So they filed these other lawsuits to try and get testimony that might be blocked elsewhere. It's interesting what happened. So they called Joe to testify. My understanding from reading this, they called him to testify, and they had the deposition taken in a courthouse, it sounds like. And when I gave my deposition, it was in a legal office. The only real reason you'd want to do it in a courthouse is if you want really quick, fast access to the judge presiding over the case or the magistrate presiding over the case. You do it in a law office, right? You might have some objections from the other side, and you have to call up the judge and hope that the judge settles it, right? You do it in a courthouse, and the judge is there that day, and the judge's office is right next door down the hall. Any type of objection, you can run down the hall and just get it settled immediately. So they asked Joe to name the source for his what he has claimed over and over again, alleged over and over again, was an Antifa phone call in the lead up to the 2020 election. And Joe refused to name the source.
Okay. Which we've spoken about before.
Which he's done for years. Seems that he got up and walked out and left rather than answer that. There's really no good answer here because it seems almost like it was a trap. Like, answer this question. No. Okay, we'll go get the judge. Go get the judge. He still says no. Go back to the judge. Judge can just hold him in contempt right then and there. Right.
Yeah.
So Joe walked out. It sounds like they're hitting him with $40,000 in legal fees for walking out. And he might be facing contempt of court charges. Well, not charges, but contempt of court, which could see him put in jail until he agrees to name the source. Other journalists have been put in jail for refusing to name sources. It has happened in this country. So this is a thing where obviously Joe is now talking about, like, he's just like Bannon, just like everyone, Lawfare is coming after him. This one seems like it's an easy fix though. Yeah,
it isn't compared to the others, certainly.
If he names the source, then this goes away. That's something that I've told him to do for a long time. Name the source. If this guy's Antifa, even reformed Antifa, name the source.
Yeah. Because you can save a lot of lives this way.
Yeah. I mean, just look at what Donald Trump's facing in Georgia. We talked about this on the podcast before. The Georgia charges go away if Joe Altman names the source and the source pans out.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
prove a criminal conspiracy to affect the 2020 election, and the Georgia charges go away. All these other charges around the country where we're seeing the alternate electors now facing fraud charges.
Yeah.
Fraud
Yeah.
charges. Those cases go away if you prove a criminal conspiracy.
All you'd have to do is give up the sources. Now, there's only two outcomes here. Either the source is real, or the source is not. Because if he gives up the source, it all goes away, right? And he doesn't deal with stuff. But if they find out there is no source, I mean, that's a whole new can of worms. That's
That
bad.
would be a whole new can of worms. That would be a whole new can of worms. He's always contended that there was a source. He seems very earnest in that. It just, in my mind, becomes really hard to balance the scales of, do I risk naming this source, or do I let Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, all these other conservatives face felony counts?
Yeah.
Right? It seems like, in the interest of justice, you name the source.
Yeah.
And if the issue is security, let's say the issue is security, that you're really worried that by naming the source, this guy, or I guess could be girl, either one, would face threats against themselves or their families. It seems like it'd be better to pay for that person's bodyguard than to pay for Eric Coomer's legal fees.
Yeah.
Right.
Put him into hiding somewhere. Change your name. Right. Move him around. Do something.
You work in this kind of protective service, or you want to become protective service. Sure. You're doing a lot of training for that. How much would $40,000 get you?
Depends on the services, but it's better than zero. Right? I mean, public appearances.
Reading, you could get a month for $40,000, as long as you don't want like Green Beret kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you just want one bodyguard to live in their house and kind of hang out with them, $40,000 could get you a month, maybe even 2 months.
And you could piecemeal it. Like, I need it just here, right, for these events, and then you're vigilant yourself. I mean, there's options, right? What I'm getting at is there's plenty of options to spend that money for that. But you could say it would be cheaper than the millions of dollars that have most likely been spent on this.
Take the millions and millions of dollars. This guy could have gotten a new face. He could have gotten a new name, new passport, right? He could have been in hiding. You could have done that for him, his family, everyone he knows.
Yeah.
Rather than paying the lawyers, paying Eric Coomer's legal fees. The scary thing is, I don't think that Eric Coomer's paying these legal fees. I think that this is probably, I don't have any inside knowledge, but if I had to guess, this is probably being taken on contingency, or Dominion is probably helping.
Sure.
I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Altman has ended up paying more of Eric Coomer's legal fees than Eric Coomer has.
Yeah. Yeah. And, this person, anybody that's a source like that, if they're smart, they've already gone into hiding, because the people that know them, know, right? They're probably already in hiding. I mean, how's it going to harm anybody if you give that up? You get that one person who you don't want to give up. You're hanging your hat on that. Oh, just one deadbeat Antifa turncoat. We're going to protect him instead of the list.
And this is the hard part.
That do need the help.
This is the hard part of all of this. Like, we've heard what Joe thinks about people who are in Antifa, right? About how he wants to go out and fight them in his underwear, how leftists should be like dragged behind cars until their limbs fall off. It's like we've heard it, right?
Yeah, we've heard
this is the class of people that he has nothing but contempt for. And those calls are cross some lines, but these are people he has nothing but contempt for.
Yeah.
So why is one of the people among this crowd suddenly getting protected at all costs? Like, it seems more important to help Donald Trump beat a felony charge in Georgia than it is to protect a former Antifa member from facing repercussions.
And we've heard from other places. I've heard on other shows, people have talked about this. There's folks who doubt that there was a source at all.
Yeah,
and if that's the case, then I mean, he's damned if you do and damned if you don't on this point now. And they're squeezing him, and he's gonna break. Something's gonna happen. I mean, there's only so much you can do before something. When you squeeze something, you find out what comes out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, there's no. if the source exists, you got to name the source.
Yeah, it's got to
Make this
happen
all
at this
go
point.
away. Stop paying Eric Coomer's legal fees.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't actually cost $40,000 to put on that deposition. It's not actually what it cost. You're
No.
paying for that deposition. You're paying for other lawfare against. Just name the source.
Yeah.
If,
Just do
if
it.
the source exists, name the source. Right. It's getting really hard to understand how protecting a former Antifa member is worth it while watching not just Trump, but all of these other conservatives. They're going after everyone. Everyone who signed up as an alternate juror in a blue state is now being charged with felony fraud. That goes away if you can prove a legitimate conspiracy to affect election results. Then it's not fraud. Then they're just trying to make sure the right results are counted. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and if he, don't be a coward. If you know the name, do it. Step forward. I wanted to say be a hero, help all these people, but if you don't do it and you're holding on to it because you have fear, don't be a coward. Make it happen. Help everybody.
I think the help probably works out, would be a stronger plea. We have a former president of the United States facing felony charges that go away if the source is named. It seems silly at this point.
Yeah.
Now, if there isn't a source, and everything he's told me is that there is one, if there isn't a source, then there's a real problem, because then you start looking at testimony under oath in these depositions in court cases. When you're testifying under oath, there's a source and I can't name him. If there isn't a source, that's perjury, right? Then you get into really murky waters. So it's not this. There's nothing fun about this. But if there's a source, you got to release a source. Put this all behind us. Stop paying for the lawfare, right? Because it's not just Eric Coomer going up against Joe Altman or our former company. He's going up against Michelle Malkin. When's the last time you heard Michelle Malkin's name?
Yeah.
She was at the top of the conservative movement.
Absolutely.
This has kind of silenced her.
It's been kind of like a political poison. You know what I mean? It's been like a bad fungus that once it's on everybody, everyone gets infected. It needs to stop. And I'm tired of trying to plead to the help side, but like, step up. If you got it, step up. If you don't, step up.
It's just, what's crazy is you look at all of the effects of this. You look at, like, OAN is like no longer on the air for most Americans, largely because of this.
Yeah, and OAN was climbing. I mean, they were great on their way forward, and then suddenly they hit a wall. Yeah,
it's not a direct thing, but I bet you Tucker Carlson is still on Fox News if Joe had named the source.
Rudy Giuliani isn't facing charges.
Yeah,
if he doesn't do this,
you name the source, and you start proving that Rudy Giuliani might not be bankrupt right now.
It's crazy.
So it's I don't want to say that it's like put up or shut up time, but it feels like
it is, though.
It feels like the time to release the source has long passed. And the idea of Joe going to jail to protect someone who was in Antifa just is crazy. That's just crazy.
Hey, I wanted him to be right. I wanted him to be right.
And I'm even saying that just from the position that I don't agree with Joe on everything. Probably nowadays I don't even agree on Joe on most things, but the things that we agree on, he absolutely helps in the conservative movement. Just for that alone, the idea that the conservative movement would lose that voice to protect someone in Antifa, it just is crazy. So if he watches this, I don't know. If he isn't watching this, then he'll never see this. But if he got the source, release it. It's stop paying Eric Coomer's legal fees. And if you have to, take that money and put it into protective details for this guy.
Yeah.
And release the source. Just release it.
Just make it all go away. All you got to do, one thing, all you have to do is release the name.
Go away. You start thinking about all of the dominoes that have fallen stemming from this. It's just, you can't balance the scales anymore. You can't tell me that this is the best way to go anymore.
I mean, either
that's all
he
we got for
can.
this episode.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Maybe he sees it. Maybe someone clips it and sends it to him. Who knows? I know he's watched our show in the past. He said our show was good. Among other things.
I'm sure. He's a unique individual who has some really unique information, and he can either step up with it or he won't.
You didn't like Josh. He said the show is good. He doesn't like Josh.
Are you surprised?
No. Knowing what we know has happened in the past, that's not even the worst thing that's happened. Yeah, but that's it for this episode. Josh just gonna smile.
I don't bother myself with things that.
Yeah.
Just.
Hell,
I'm facing jail time if I don't give up with numbers. You know what I'm saying?
I can't imagine coming home to my wife and saying, Annie, I'm going to jail to protect someone in Antifa. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I
couldn't either.
We'll see.
Cool.
We'll see. That's it for this edition of the podcast. If you like the podcast, like, comment, subscribe. Links are in the description. If you're watching us on Twitter or X, we go live on Rumble and YouTube as well. Subscribe over there to get guaranteed alerts when these podcasts come out Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Tune in for that. We also have the audio edition of the podcast, so you can subscribe to that. Get that auto downloaded so you can listen while you're driving, commuting, or whatnot. That's it for this edition of the podcast. My name is Max McGuire.
I'm Josh Hammerling.
Remember, the fight to take back our country is not over yet, but the only way we win is if we all stand up and fight together. See you next time.
See ya.